and welcome to the 2021 French GP Strategy Analysis Race Overview video. If you're new to the channel, which is everybody because this is the first video, welcome. In the race overview, each race week I'll go over position movement, strategy, championship battle, and midfield battle highlights, and an overview of the strategy winners and losers. There'll also be a video for every single team and also some key highlights from championship, midfield, and lower tier teams. Kicking straight into position movements, just a quick overview here before we dive into the strategy. As we know, Verstappen, great two-stop strategy, kept first from starting from first. Hamilton ended up second. Perez leapfrogging Bottas with the longer first stint. Then moving down into the midfield, Ferrari did not have a good day. McLaren, on the other hand, excellent job. Gasly as well performed well, as did Alonso. Ocon, unfortunately, did not have the best day. Moving further down, Aston Martin, again, great performance. And then the rest of the field, some variation in strategy, but it was relatively consistent this weekend. So then looking at the gainers, Perez, both McLaren drivers executed strategy excellent along with Alonso. And then Aston Martin, again, going a long first stint on both cars. Coming through this time, Russell did a great job as well, and Tsunoda starting at the back, reclaimed a lot of positions. Now, on the other hand, losers, Bottas, obviously, Ferrari were definitely the biggest losers on the weekend though, and Ocon, his strategy did not work for him. Alrighty, moving through to the strategy. So, going into this race, everyone was calling a one-stop race, and it became apparent relatively early on the second stint for the leaders that this may not actually be a one-stop race in the end. So let's focus on the first four to start with. So we've got Bottas. He was actually the first to pit, trying to undercut Verstappen. Verstappen reacted straight away, whereas Hamilton waited an extra lap. And this, if I was to put a single moment on why Hamilton did not win the race, it was because Mercedes waited that extra lap. I don't quite understand why they didn't bring Hamilton in immediately after Bottas. They thought Bottas could undercut Verstappen with a similar gap to what Verstappen had to Hamilton. And at the end of the day, Hamilton only came out just behind Verstappen. If they hadn't have had that extra lap, then I think Hamilton probably would have come out in front, would have had more clear air, wouldn't have hurt his tyres as much, even if Verstappen did go on and do a two-stop. I really do think that was the difference in this race. Perez, as you can see there, the standout, keeping that first stint tyre going a lot longer. His lap times did suffer, but that ended up really rewarding him in the end by able to catch Bottas, despite how far behind he was. And Verstappen, as we know, Red Bull made that bold call to go a two-stop relatively early on, but you needed to be first on making that call, because if you weren't first, you're probably going to get undercut. So Verstappen, great call by the Red Bull team. They weren't going to let what Mercedes did to them in Spain happen again. Made that call for the two-stopper and caught them with 1.5 laps to go. Moving on to the midfield now. So the combo of Norris, Ricciardo, Gasly, Alonso, rounding out the top 8 there. As you can see, very similar strategies here. Ricciardo having the early pit before Bottas to undercut at that time both Gasly and Sainz, and that was a masterstroke by McLaren. Excellent job. And as we've seen, common theme here, the undercut was a lot stronger than people were expecting going into the weekend. Norris was looking a little bit in no man's land for a while there when he was left out a lot longer on that first stint, but his lap times didn't actually suffer that much, and in the end he had much better tyres to finish off the race, as we also saw with Perez. So for me, McLaren, excellent job from the strategy perspective. Undercut with Ricciardo, letting Norris go strong and coming through. Two bold calls, sure, but it really did work for them. Vettel and Stroll, Aston Martin continue to deliver. They don't have the qualifying performance, but they are really delivering strategy on race day. And that hard tyre seems to really work with them. As you can see, they lasted a long time as you'd expect, but really worked well for them. And one race, they're going to have a long first stint and a safety car is going to come out and they're going to leap up that order as a result. But great job there. Vettel actually did a much better job towards the end. Stroll's tyres just went off, but Vettel couldn't quite catch Alonso. Okay, moving down to the next section. So Ferrari and Sainz. Ferrari did not have a good day. They didn't have the race pace at all. As we'll see with Leclerc, they ended up doing a two-stopper there. Russell and Tsunoda. Remembering Tsunoda coming back from the back of the grid. Bit surprised personally. They didn't put a hard on there, but I assume they were wanting some quick overtakes from Tsunoda to not get stuck behind any traffic. Ocon, definitely one driver that hard tyre really didn't work for him that well, whereas for Alonso, as soon as he puts that hard tyre on, he really seems to perform well. A little bit further down here, looking at Leclerc, as I said, 2-stop, and that was just not a good race for Ferrari at all. The 2-stop strategy, Leclerc first to pit on the tyres initially, which actually looks great initially because he undercut both Gasly and Sainz, which were a fair way in front of him when he did that, remembering that both Ricciardo and Norris overtook him in quick succession. But his tyres just completely fell off the cliff and had to do that second stop. Raikkonen did a relatively good job, but Giovinazzi got him this weekend. Latifi, very similar, typical strategy as with Schumacher. And then Mazepin reversed it with Schumacher, but still ended up last. So as you can see there, by far and away, medium onto hard was the most common strategy. Only 2 drivers did the 2-stop, and one of them came first and the other one came right down the bottom. So very much it was those tyres were falling off towards the end. Anyone who could really prolong that first stop did benefit, as we saw with Perez and Norris, but at the same time, Ricciardo there coming a little bit earlier, he was able to undercut both Gasly and Alonso, and neither of them had the tyres at the end to actually get past Ricciardo. So really, I think you either need to make an early pit to get the undercut, but not too early like Leclerc, or hold on a lot longer and have those hards just a little bit better condition towards the end to make a storm through the pack. So now that we've had a look at the strategy, these race positions, we can go into a little bit more detail here. Verstappen lost at the first corner and then had the pit back to first after undercutting Hamilton, which was a great move, but it was very clear those first 3 were pushing it very hard from a race perspective. And as a result, it looks like all 3 of them were pretty much saying that their tyres weren't going to last till the end. Red Bull made the call to bring Verstappen in. Personally, I understand leaving Hamilton out the front, but to not bring Bottas in as well, or even bring Bottas in a bit earlier than what they're anticipating Red Bull to bring Verstappen in, a bit of a surprise for me. You've got 2 cars up the front and you don't split strategies. Rather interesting. And then as we saw, Verstappen making his charge through the field, admittedly with Perez, not much of a competition there. Look at Hamilton, got that lead initially and had really good pace compared to Verstappen. In that second stint on the tyre, he was starting to fall away a little bit, as we'll dig into a little bit later. But as we saw, hold on for a really long time, but the last few laps, his times really did suffer and Verstappen could get up high. Bottas, as we know, St. George Hamilton effectively just came in those 2 laps earlier and got overtaken by Perez. Perez did an excellent job, as he always does, lasting on that first tyre. Was able to get the reward there with the podium. Alrighty, moving down into Ferrari. As we know, Ferrari didn't have the race pace today, really harsh on their tyres, especially Leclerc, having to do those 2 stops and being the first one to pit off the first set of tyres. Back to reality, as Ferrari was saying earlier in the weekend. Gasly, I think, had a great race. The McLaren probably did have better pace overall across the weekend, and Gasly did a great job on qualifying to get ahead of them, but I do think those McLarens probably did deserve to end up 5th and 6th, as they did. So great job by Gasly. McLaren, good job in terms of splitting the strategy a little bit, just in terms of when those drivers pit. And Norris did a great job on those fresh tyres at the end, got past Ricciardo pretty easily. And we've also got Alonso in there. Alonso, as soon as he puts the hard on, he does a great charge. So good job there by Alpine. Ocon, on the other hand, didn't have the best weekend, unfortunately. Vettel, long first stint, came through. Great job in the end there from Aston Martin. They know they don't have the qualifying pace at the moment, but they're doing a great job on race weekends. Giovinazzi, pretty good weekend for him, especially given he only really lost position to Stroll and Tsunoda coming through. Got Russell, great job from him. One day he'll get points, hopefully soon, but wasn't far off this weekend if something had happened up the front. Schumacher, great qualifying performance, but unfortunately couldn't bring that through to the race. And then finishing off the list, Latifi, decent performance from him. Raikkonen, a bit surprising that he was a bit further back from Giovinazzi. And then we've got Mazepin to finish it off. And then here we go. So Stroll, great job, long first stint, came through there, really good job. And I really do think Aston Martin understands they don't have the qualifying pace, but from a strategy point of view, they're doing a great job getting that clear air, keeping those tyres last in a long time. And finally, Tsunoda had relatively good pace throughout the weekend, but compared to Gasly, he's still a fair way behind. So moving on to pit time. So this is looking at the total time through the pit lane, and up the front there we've got Perez, Latifi as well, and Verstappen. This is going to be pivotal when we look at how the undercut actually worked. Other notable ones there, we've got Ricciardo and Russell, so Williams doing a great job, and then on the back end, no real potential championship contenders there. Hamilton's actually quite far forward, but when we look at the undercut, if there is a single graph that I think really shows it from this weekend, this is the time of the outlap after the pit stop. You can see there, Verstappen, 2 pit stops, he had 2 of the first 3 times. Bottas did a great job as well. But you just need to look at the gap between Verstappen and Hamilton, almost 2 seconds. Now that keeps in mind, Hamilton did come up right behind Verstappen, so there was obviously a bit of a delay there. But Verstappen was clear and away very, very quick on that outlap, and that's the difference really. He smashed it, only person under 100 seconds on that outlap by a considerable margin as well. Very, very impressive. That is the key difference. Verstappen getting ahead of Hamilton on that. So here we are looking at the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen. Hamilton there has actually started to increase a bit of a lead there at the start. But then Verstappen coming in, getting that undercut, and you can see there right before Verstappen actually pits, that gap really started to increase, and that may have actually just been the incentive for Red Bull to say that they could see Hamilton's pace going off, and they thought, you know what, this is going to work. Those tyres are going to go off the edge. And as you can see, Verstappen, especially at the start after his second pit stop, absolutely clawed it back. This period here, definitely between, say, lap 45, 46, 47, for a while there, it looked like Verstappen wasn't actually going to be able to catch Hamilton, but I think it was really just back markers getting in the way. And then once Verstappen was clear of those, he hunted Hamilton down and got there. Lap and a half to go. The overtake was probably a bit easier than I was expecting when it actually came to be, but relatively easy for Verstappen. Looking at the lap pace here, relatively even between the two until Verstappen put on those new tyres at the end there. Really, really made a difference as well, and you can see that outlap compared to Hamilton, that's the key difference. That is why the undercut actually worked for Verstappen there. So this is just a bit of a zoom in on that final period once Verstappen had done his second pit stop. You can see that Hamilton did a great job, keep around 97.5 seconds per lap, but as Mercedes was saying, those last 4 to 5 laps were going to be the tough ones. And that was actually the difference there. Verstappen didn't actually get that much quicker over those last 5 laps when he caught Hamilton up. It was more Hamilton styles just truly, truly hitting the cliff. And that was the difference in the end. And just really highlighting again on that first pit stop, which really I do think was the game maker in this race. If Hamilton got back in front of Verstappen there, I think he would have won the race. But if you look at both the in-lap there, Hamilton and Bitzler on the in-lap compared to Verstappen, and again the out-lap, both of those combined, that's why the undercut worked. Quick look at the midfield battles, and of course if you want more detail of that, there will be a midfield video. Ricciardo versus Gasly, exceptional job on the undercut here by McLaren, and Ricciardo picked up quite a bit of a lead over Gasly at one stage, up to 6 seconds, and then you can see Gasly slowly bringing that lead back, but at the end, even though he had DRS, it didn't have enough time to actually get an overtake done on Ricciardo. Looking at Vettel and Alonso here, so Vettel went very, very long, Alonso pitted typically with the medium tyre, and although it was starting to get a little bit close towards the end there, Vettel wasn't quite able to catch up to Alonso, but give it a few more laps and it would have happened. But just interesting look at the change of strategies there. And now on to strategy summary. So strategy winners for me, Red Bull. They split the strategy, which was fantastic, and Perez, as you'll see if you watch the championship video, top of the field video for this race debrief. He was a fair way behind, but they were able to split that strategy really well, and when the tyres fell off the cliff for Mercedes, and especially Bottas, he was able to come in and take that podium. And really, for Red Bull, it was redemption from Spain, being able to do the undercut with the second pit stop on Hamilton and actually having the tyres at the end. Excellent job, and I really don't think Red Bull was going to let Mercedes do that again. And, you know, based on the radio, Mercedes, maybe they were considering a second stop, but once Verstappen came in, it was too late for Hamilton to do that. For me, McLaren, great job as well. First up, the undercut with Ricciardo to get ahead of Gasly and Sainz. And then Norris actually really had a long first stint, and that meant he had the tyres right at the end to actually make that charge through the field. So excellent job by McLaren from me. And Aston Martin, masters of the long first stints. Yes, they had hard tyres, but that switching strategy, knowing that they're outside the top 10, they had that tyre choice. Great job. Strategy losers for me, Mercedes. First, the undercut. I still don't fully appreciate why Mercedes didn't bring Hamilton in that lap after Bottas. They weren't going to have to double stack. They knew Verstappen was coming in at the same time, and they had about a 2.5 second lead. So plenty of time, even if something was to go wrong in the pit stop. For me, that cost them the race, full stop. And no trick on the second stop. As I said, they may have been looking to do that, and they just never quite. They were aiming for maybe 1 or 2 laps later than what Red Bull did. And also for me, the fact they didn't split strategies is a little bit confusing. They had the cars running second and third, both of them saying that those tyres weren't going to last to the end. Even if they did bring Bottas in really early, that still would have made it a lot more interesting. And if they brought him in, we may be able to undercut Verstappen in doing that and actually hold Verstappen up a lot longer if they're on the same tyres in terms of age. And then Ferrari, not so much strategy based, but really did significantly lack race pace today. And Leclerc bringing him in early and then having to do a second stop as well, that really hurt them. So that's the video for the race overview for the French Grand Prix. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe. If you've got any suggestions, please send them through, and then check out the other videos from this race weekend. Thank you.